Hey there guys, Gamer Jamie Triple One here, and today I am just going to be talking about some cars I would like to be introduced into the next Forza Horizon game. Um, I am finishing writing and recording this throughout January and February of 2025. I finished writing it um, sort of towards the end of January, and I am recording it currently on the 13th of February. So that's sort of the timeline I'm working with. So if there's any newer cars being released sort of after that point, they won't be like revealed after that point. Um, they won't be on this list. But Um, I started writing this list during 2024, and it was curated over a couple of months, and I finalized everything within the last couple of days. Um, I currently have around 100 cars on this list, so let's get into it as quickly as possible. Um, I also hope the FH5 list transfers over to FH6 as much as possible. So, whilst I won't mention many cars that were included in FH5, um, there are going to be some that were released in DLC packs or as part of the festival playlist. Um, that are not guaranteed to be transferred over. They will be included. So let's get into it. Uh, First up, I want to start with the Abarth 600E. Now, this is the new car by Abarth. It'll be their most powerful model ever made at 280 horsepower, and it starts production in 2025, and hopefully customers will start receiving their car this year, if not then likely very early 2026. I would also add the Fiat 600 in here to contrast and compare. Next up is the Acura Integra Type S from 2024. I added this car because it's a great starter type car. It'll be fun to thrash around the track and have a lot of lower power fun with this car. And when you upgrade the car, it'll be fun to compete it against other Type R cars, as well as some of the faster cars practically confirmed to be in game because of how many recent Forza games they've been in, along with some on the list that I've done. After that is another Acura. This time it's the NSX Type S from 2022. I added this one because it's time the NSX had a bit of an upgrade. The one we have in game right now is the 2017 model, which is almost, if not already, 8 years old due to how they date car models. Plus, the new version just looks better than the old one, being ever so slightly sleeker. After that, the third and final Acura, the Acura TLX Type S. This is a four-door saloon with 355 horsepower from a 3-litre V6, propelling the car to 60 in under 6 seconds and a quarter mile in less than 14 seconds. This will be an absolute rocket ship on some of the tracks, and I would love to find out how much of a rocket ship it is going to be by having this car in game. Up next is the first Alfa Romeo, but it's going to be the first two Alfa Romeos in the GTA M and the Giulia GTA M and the Giulia EV. I have these two as one because they are basically the same car, except one has a V6 and the other has electric motors and slightly different styling cues. But I'd love both in the game to try them out side by side and see if electric power really is better overall between these two cars. Up next is the second or third Alfa Romeo, the Alfa Romeo Junior. This is the current mild hybrid EV compact SUV from Alfa, and it has two different front options. One with the logo cut out of the V that you find at the front of all Alphas, and the other with Alfa Romeo as words on the lattice mesh like grill that looks like a waterfall of lattice. I don't know how to explain it. There'll be a picture somewhere. Up next is the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale from 2024. This is the new and upgraded 33 Stradale from the 60s, which is already in FH5. And bringing this into the next game would be amazing because we can compare the new with the old. And this would give the and this would give the devs a new opportunity of engine swap because this comes as a V6, but it also has an all-electric version, which could make room for other cars that have an ICE to be swapped with an EV motor, which would keep up with what is the current trend of taking old internal combustion engine ICE cars and ripping the engine out and EV swapping them, especially old cars with damaging engines like diesels and even some highly uneconomic petrol powered cars. Up next, we take a slight detour from Italy and move into France with the Alpine A110R. This is the hyped up, jumped up, powered up Alpine A110, which has been on a 34 kilogram diet and a 0 to 60 of less than 4 seconds. This is a track monster that is road legal, and I can't wait to try this where it belongs, on an open road with no speed limits. Up next, we stay in France. We stay with Alpine, but this time it's the A290 / Renault R5, and either both preferably, but either or. Basically, Renault are giving their R5 over to Alpine and telling them to boost it up and make it a bit faster and stick a new body kit to it and then send it onto a racetrack. And I can't wait to see how Alpine pulls this one off because it's already a very quick car as provided by Renault. So I want to test them both, which is why both are put together. Up next is the Aston Martin DB12. This was very recently announced, so I don't expect this to come anytime soon. But when it is able to come into the game, I'd love to test it against the outgoing DB11 and see how much better the 12 is. Next, we have the Aston Martin V12 Vantage from 2024. Just look at it. That is all. Up next, we have the Aston Martin V12 Speedster. This is a beautiful car, and I would love it to come to FH6 because it'd be fun to drive it in first person, cruising on the open road, only to then be able to thrash it around the racetrack and unleash its true potential would be just as fun. Now, with the final Aston Martin on this list, the Aston Martin Vanquish from 2024. Just look at this thing. It is a work of art, and I love it so much. That is all. Next is we are taking a slight detour over to Germany to Audi with the RS6 Avant from 2024. This car is on everyone's wish list for any Forza game. But I added it because it shows that you don't have to be a two-door, one-seat, stripped-out race car to be able to have fun. This is a family estate car that looks aggressive and has a 4-litre V8 pumping 620 plus horsepower into the tarmac. This is going to be one to beat in its class. Up next, we stay in Germany and we stay with Audi. We even stay with the RS6 slightly because this is the Audi RS6 e-tron Avant. I know these are only very recently announced and didn't go into production until late 2024 at the earliest and released in mid-ish 2025 at the earliest. Or releasing in mid-ish 2025 at the earliest. But I would love to see this come to Forza because it'll give us a chance to experience the future of Audi, where they turn their RS estate cars into electrified power monsters that destroy every track time they are put against. Up next, we stay in Germany, but we do move ever so slightly to BMW with the BMW 3.0 CSL, released to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the M division of BMW. This car could be fun to play with because it is designed with track racing in mind, drifting and everything else possible on a racetrack, but without the very real possibility of causing harm to yourself or the car. That's the important part. Up next, we stay with BMW. We move ever so slightly to the 4 Series, but it's the M4 CSL. Also released as part of the 50th anniversary celebrations, and on the Nürburgring, it achieved a 7 minutes and 20.2 seconds, or a slightly shorter track time of 7 minutes 15.6 seconds. It'll be fun to try and beat rivals' times with this car, because that's kind of the whole point of the car to begin with. Up next, staying with BMW, moving ever so slightly to the 3 Series with the M3 Estate from 2023. We have the sedan version in FH5 and presumably FH6. So why not the Estate/wagon version? It'd be fun to test it against itself that has less boot space. So you get the same 4.4 litre twin turbo V8 with more than 500 horsepower. What's not to love about that? Up next, another BMW. Not quite a 3 Series though, but a 5 Series. The BMW M5 Touring from 2025. This car looks amazing, and as a bit of a BMW fanboy, I love this car specifically. I love the styling cues, and I love the power output this thing has. Plus, It has an electrically enhanced twin turbo V8 slamming 717 furious horses into the tarmac with 1,000 Newton meters of torque, slingshotting you to 60 in about 3 seconds, and a top speed of 190 with the limiter turned off by BMW as an optional upgrade. And all of that in an estate car with 500 litres of boot space. What's not to love? Next, we have the BMW M135i. I added this car because we need more small hatchbacks in the game. I know they said BMW said they're taking a more track-focused approach by designing cars either designed exclusively for the track as fully fledged race cars, or track-focused cars that are fast on the track and can be driven back home, assuming you didn't crash during the track meet. But it'd just bring the fun factor even more to the Horizon games. Like how you had tin boxers like the KA and the IGO in FM4. Nobody liked them IRL, but they loved chucking them about on tracks on Forza. This car is fully in the same vein as them. And finally, the final BMW, the BMW i5. This is the new 5 Series, but with full electric running through its veins. I would love to see this car in the game because it would show everyone a bit of the future in a car we all know and love most, being the 5 Series. I'd also include the brand new i3, i4, and i7. But the i5 has a bit more to it that I would love to see more, and I can't explain why. It's not too different from the rest in that they all align with their petrol models in terms of power and performance and looks. But this car has a little more to it that makes it stand out for me. Next, we take a little bit of a flight over to America with the Buick Envision 2024-2025. The updated version of the Buick Envision. This car has a bit more tech added to it, a bit better styling cues, and it just looks better on paper overall. I know they're not going to put a Buick SUV into the game, especially one that's not even technically released as of yet, but if they do, then I hope it's this one. Next, we move over back to France, kind of, with the Bugatti Chiron 300 Plus. I added the Chiron 300 Plus because I would love to be able to test this car against the other Chiron and even possibly the Hennessy F5 Venom GT to see if I can get a better lap time or top speed than them, and see if we can hit the 300 mile an hour mark on the highway, motorway, depending on where the game is set. I would also add on the Tourbillon, the Bugatti Tourbillon, because that's sort of showing us where Bugatti is going next. Up next, we have the BYD Seal. This is one of, if not the cheapest electric vehicle on sale in the UK and I think Europe. It's a Chinese alternative to the likes of the BMW 3 Series and Audi A4, A5 range. Pretty basic, but it can get anywhere from 201 horsepower all the way up to 523. I would also add the Dolphin hatchback, the Seal '06 GT hot hatch, and the Seal U SUV into this BYD range. Up next, we go back to America, this time with Cadillac. And this is the Cadillac Celestiq. This is the flagship sedan for Cadillac as they go electrified. I want this car in the game so we can test it out against its petrol-powered older siblings and see who comes out victorious overall. And adding on to the Celestiq, I would love the Cadillac Lyric. This is an all-electric SUV that is coming to the UK in 2025, and I, for one, may never see one on the roads, but I want to see one in FH6 so I can see what it's like and get a feel for it, and just go and enjoy a cruise or thrash it around a racetrack as fast as it'll go. Next is the Citroen EC3. This is a little bit of a wild card, an everyday hatchback on stilts that looks kind of funky in both a good and bad way, but something about it still makes me want it. It's hard to explain, but I hope we get something like this as a weird option that nobody expects. Up next, we take a drive down south from France to Spain with the Cupra Leon ST Sport Drive Estate. The new Leon Estate by Cupra, it looks better than the Seat version. It has a 306 horsepower engine and it can do 0 to 60 in roughly 4.5 seconds from an estate car that your nan drives. What's better than that? Up next is two cars, the Dacia Duster and Sandero. I added these two because I would love some loving for this cheap as chips and very fun car. It proves that you don't have to spend £50,000 on a car to have fun. You can get a basic Dacia Sandero for less than £10,000 and a Duster for less than £15,000 and have as much fun as the £50,000 Porsche and BMW and other alternatives. Up next is the Dodge Charger Hellcat widebody red eye, the newest update to the Charger Hellcat, and I think the final update to the Charger Hellcat, being the red eye version, clawing 797 horsepower into the tarmac through the rear wheels as it propels you from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds and just 12 seconds for a standstill quarter mile. This car is already in the Crew Motorfest with some amazing and crazy AF modifications. But to see it in a Forza game to compete on proper handling physics would be amazing. Although I hope they don't skimp on the customization for this car, because if it just gets that generic Forza wing, then it's a huge waste. And I know the Fast and Furious version is already in Forza Horizon 5, but this would be the standard version that you can get from any Dodge dealership. I also hope they keep the Fast and Furious edition into FH6. Next, we have another Dodge, and another Charger. But this time it's the EV Charger. This car is currently only a concept, but this car actually has a lot of potential, showing muscle car enthusiasts you don't need a great big honking V8 in your car to have a lot of fun. Pumping 670 horsepower out of its four wheels and making a sound out of the back through speakers equivalent to the Hellcat engine, so you don't lose the noise. You just lose the weight of the engine and replace it with batteries, so you get the instant torque and likely much faster standing quarter mile times. Up next, we are back in Italy. This time with with Ferrari, and it is the Ferrari SF90 XX Stradale, the first road legal XX car by Ferrari, galloping out 1,016 horses every time you pump your right foot as far into the carpet as you can get it to go. Nobody seems to have taken it for a 0 to 60 run, and Ferrari haven't released their times, but this has more power, more stability, less weight, and better performance overall. And the SF90 can do it in 2.5 seconds. The XX Stradale must be able to do it in less than that. Up next, stay with Ferrari. This time, and I know I'm probably going to butcher this, but the Pura Sangue. Ferrari's first ever SUV with 725 horsepower out of a V12. 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. This would be hard to beat in its class. Plus, it would be one of the most unique cars to ever exist in the game, being a Ferrari SUV. It would be fun to compare it with other high-performance brand SUVs like Lamborghini, Aston Martin, Bentley, etc. So please, Ferrari, let them have the Pura Sangue. Next, we stay in Italy, but we don't stay with Ferrari. We stay with F, but we move ever so slightly to Fiat. And this is the Fiat Centoventi. This cute little car should be included in the game because of how cute it looks and how fun it could be to fling it round a track or even through the streets going at full speed everywhere, because it's got that little of horsepower of around 100 to 150, roughly in line with the current Fiat 500 electric, which is another car I would like to see, but I doubt they're going to include it. But it has roughly 100 to 150 horsepower. That's not enough for it to get out of its own way. So, taking it through the streets is going to be fun. We stay with Fiat, but we go to the Grande Panda. This is the rebirth of the Panda as a hatchback on stilts, even more so than the last generation. And I love the retro OG Panda styling look with the updated technology, including the LED lights across the front and the headlights in a sort of X formation. Next, we're going back to America. We're staying with F, but we're going to Ford. And this is the Ford Mustang GTD. Now, this is what I'm talking about. A diesel race car that could be used on the road. Sign me up. That is all. But it's not all for Ford. Bear with me. This is the Ford e-Transit. I know we already have the Super Sport van and the Super Van 3 and 4 in FH Drive, but I think the vans need updating a bit and bring in the new version of the Transit van and let us have some van love, because it's being seriously lacking, unfortunately. I'd also add the Mercedes Sprinter van, perhaps the VW Transporter, to give the new Transit a contemporary competitor. Again, we stay with Ford, but this time it's the Cougar. I added this car because it's a bit of a random one. One of those wild card suggestions. An SUV with a small amount of power at around 120 to 180, depending on the model. It's also got the option of having a plug-in hybrid version, which boosts it a little bit. I doubt they will ever put this car into the game, but it is a wildcard suggestion and always possible. Again, we stay with Ford, but this time it's the Ford Puma EV. The car I know for sure is a contender to be included because they have a hybrid WRC version of this car ran by Red Bull, so it's possible that Red Bull and Ford agree to have the WRC version in. Whether the civilian version will be included is a bit more cloudy, but I hold out a bit of hope. And my final Ford is the Ford EcoSport. Another small SUV with small power, small engine, and big possibilities. Fun on the track at full speed everywhere, for planted firmly in the carpet at every opportunity. This is another wild card like the Cougar, but it's one I want in more. Up next is Genesis, specifically the Genesis GV90. They occasionally put random luxury SUVs into the game, like the XC90 in FM7 or the BMW iX in FH5. So, could be possible this new luxury Genesis gets included at some point. Maybe not at the beginning of the game's life cycle, but definitely during this Horizon's life cycle. Fingers crossed. Next is the Hennessy Venom F5 Revolution. We already have the normal F5 in FH5, and it's likely to be included in FH6, so why not have the Revolution version included too? I do hold out hope that they are both included in the game at some point. Next, we are taking a trip over to Japan with the Honda Civic Type R from 2024. I hope the new Civic Type R is included in the game because it's such an iconic car brand on its own, and the new version seems to be building upon the last version and making it better in every way. Better styling, better performance, better handling, better everything. So to compare it against other Civics would be amazing. Next, we stay with Honda. We go electric with the Honda E. The teeny tiny electric Honda city car with a range of around 140 miles and an output of 130 to 150. If we got this in the game, I'd love for a wacky engine swap to be able to go into it. Like a Rimac Nevera motor or a BMW iX motor or the Ford Super Van 4 motor. Because this is a tiny car and we deserve the crazy nut job option with this. Kind of in the same vein as the Wuling Hongguang Mini EV, where the car was a little teeny tiny box on wheels, but could have nearly 1200 horsepower fully upgraded. We need that again, but on the Honda E. Next, we stay with Honda. We move out of electric and back into ICE engines. But the Honda Odyssey, much bigger than the Honda E. This includes both versions, the international version and the North American version, because they look so different, yet are similar in performance, so it'd be fun to compare and see who gets the better car, international or North America. And it'd be fun to have some more station wagon MPVs added into the game. Also for consideration, the Honda station wagon, that's station WGN, and Honda Element. Next, still with Honda, and it's my final Honda, the Honda N wagon. That's NWGN. This is a Japan, Hong Kong, and Macau exclusive, and it is basically the MPV K car. Literally, if you go to Japan, you will see this car or other manufacturer versions of this exact car everywhere. And if FH6 is actually set in Japan, as is wanted by the community, then this would be a perfect addition. And it'd help bring some more love to the K cars, because they are so cute. And if I could live in Japan, I'd have a bunch of K cars because I love them so much. And whilst we are talking of K cars, at the N1, N van, and N box, because they are all super cute, based on the same design, and I would have all of them. Up next, we move to South Korea for the first time with the Hyundai i20N. I included this car because it's such a brilliant little car and a perfect starter car for those who are less experienced to get to grips with everything. And it'd be fun to throw around the track with the Veloster N, which I hope also comes to the game. It must be because it's been in everything since FM7, but you never know. But the i20N is a fun little car, very small horsepower, very small engine, but a lot of fun to be had. This was very recently added to Forza Motorsport 2023, so fingers crossed that it's going to be an FH6. It definitely seemed to be from FH5, especially with the Maxton design body options. So a little bit of something there, maybe, hopefully. But to contrast that with the i20N, the Hyundai i30N, another brilliant starter car that's a bit bigger than the i20N, but still a small powered little pocket rocket. And I want to have some fun with it, throwing it into a corner at 100 miles an hour and hoping it stays on the road. This was included in FH5, so I hope they keep it for the next game. Next is the Hyundai Ioniq 6N. This has only recently been spotted, but the original Ioniq 6 was slow in FH5. So maybe bring the N version into FH6 in order to give us a properly fast Ioniq 6. Because we deserve that at the very least. And talking of Ioniqs, perhaps even the Ioniq 9 could come into the game. The largest EV Hyundai will make, and it's a 7-seater minivan. So that goes into the minivan MPV love. that is very well needed. Up next, we stay with Hyundai, this time with the Insta. It's a Hyundai hatchback mini off-roader type thing, kinda like the Suzuki Jimny, but it looks even cooler. So I'd look forward to that being introduced when it's introduced, because at this point it has to be, no doubt about that. Up next is my final Hyundai, the Santa Fe from 2024. This is the updated electrified SUV from Hyundai, and the new design is very fun to look at and would be just as fun to drive, and compare it to other lower power EV SUVs. So get onto it, playground games. Up next, we stay in South Korea, but we move over to Kia with the Kia PV5. This looks like it'll be a personal hackney cab. It's an MPV slash minivan, but it still looks like a slightly boxier version of the current electric London taxi, just with a flattened nose, like the vehicle took a run at a wall and said, yeah, that'll do, when it was flat enough. So I hope this comes, because it'd be another wild card, off the wall kind of option. Up next, we take it over to Sweden, but not necessarily where you're thinking. It's not Volvo yet. It's Koenigsegg with the Gemera. This car is just amazing, pumping out 1,400 horsepower from a 2-litre twin turbocharged inline 3-cylinder engine. Or you can get the 5-litre twin turbo V8 version, which pumps out a mind boggling 2,300 horsepower. $2,300 from a 5-litre twin turbo V8. Huh? This car was originally designed just for the owner of Koenigsegg to take his wife and 2 children out, but they have since put it into production, and it is a smash hit. It is in the Crew 2 and the Crew Motorfest, but I haven't got it as of yet in those, unfortunately. So being able to get it a little bit easier in FH6 is definitely beneficial. Up next, we stay with Koenigsegg, this time for the Jesko Absolute. This car is the most aerodynamic Koenigsegg Jesko that can achieve a mind-boggling top speed of theoretically 330 to 350 from 1,600 horsepower with a weight of 1,390 kilos. Just mind-boggling stats, and something for the game to contend with. Having a car that can achieve 330 to 350 in game potentially, really putting the current 310-ish speed limit to the absolute test. Up next, we have the Lamborghini Urus Performante. I know I probably just butchered up Urus, but we live. The SUV, I am really looking forward to seeing in the game, because they're very likely to include it. It's a track-focused, more powerful version of the Urus, and they already have that likely to be in the game already. So having a more powerful, slightly better handling version can only get better. Plus, it has 666 horsepower. Up next, we stay with Lamborghini We go out of the SUV territory and we move to the Lamborghini Revuelto, the Aventador successor, which is in the Crew Motorfest, and I would love to see it included in FH6. I think it would be great to test the new Aventador replacement of the Revuelto against the outgoing Aventador variants like the SV or SVJ, or even potentially the Aventador Ultimate, which was the very last Aventador ever made before they moved over to the Revuelto. That's if that transfers across to FH6. Up next is the last Lamborghini, Temeraria, the Huracan successor. Again, it'd be fun to test the Huracan replacement of the Temerario against the outgoing Huracan, and maybe even the Huracan Performante or STO or Evo or Technica. And that's all I had written down. I don't really know what else to add there. Up next, we go back over to Japan with Lexus. The Lexus IS 500F Sport 2023. This is the latest version of the IS 500 to be released. It's a slightly more powerful model, a slightly better handling model, and just a bit prettier to look at than the previous model. Everything looks sleeker, so it would be fun to see this in the game. Up next, we go over to the UK. So I'm coming home with the Lotus Electra. Lotus's first ever SUV, and it is electric. They are going full on with this car. 600 to 750 horsepower four-wheel drive. Possibility of being up to 900 horsepower. Gorgeous sleek lines, amazing interior, amazing technology of having a LiDAR system. And it sounds like a huge potential for the game. Up next, we are going back to Italy, but we're going to Maserati this time with the Maserati Gran Turismo from 2023. The current Gran Turismo from 2010-ish just needs updating, and now is the perfect time to do just that. That's all that needs to be said. But the current Gran Turismo not only looks better, it has more power than the previous version, but it handles better than the previous version. So it can only get better. Next, we stay with Maserati. This time it's the MC20. I think this car has been rumoured to be coming to FH5 for the longest time. I think it started being rumoured in later 2023, and now in early 2025 with the updates for FH5 stopping for the foreseeable future. It seems like it's never going to come. Unless it comes out after the PS5 version releases, or it's waiting in the files for FH6 and they're just testing the car in FH5 in prep to have it on day one in FH6. I don't know what is happening in terms of why this car was found in the files, but it can only be that it's either going to be coming out extremely late in FH5's life cycle, or it's going to be on day one of FH6, or it's going to be released in FH6's very early life cycle. Hopefully sooner than later. Up next, we're going back over to the UK. We're going to McLaren. And this is my second car that is already in FH5 that I want to double down and make sure stays over to FH6. And that's the McLaren Artura. McLaren's newest car, their first V6 car, their second hybrid engine car, and it turns out a reasonable 670 horsepower. But this car has a trick up its sleeve and being great on a track. I know this is an FH5, but I want to make sure this car especially transfers over. So that's why I'm including it on this list, because I love the looks of this car and I want to see what a higher resolution version would look like in FH6 without having to downgrade it for the Xbox One version, where it can be super detailed for the Xbox Series consoles. Up next is the McLaren W1. This was recently revealed in the later months of 2024, and it is phenomenal looking and is a spiritual successor to the P1. And it brings the heralding of a new holy trinity, that being the McLaren W1, the Ferrari F80, and the Porsche Mission X. I have not put these on the list, but they are included if they are able to bring them to the game. I only have the W1 because it is the one that is rumoured to be produced first, although both are both of the others are slated for commencement of 2025, and the Mission X has not been announced to officially be getting made, but is going to influence the eventual car that completes the Trinity that will be starting production in 2025. Up next, we go back to Germany, but this time to Mercedes, finishing out that holy trinity of Audi, BMW, and Mercedes. But not exactly where you would think. This is 5 cars in one spot, but it is the E range. So that's the EQA, the EQC, EQE, EQG, and EQV. The electric range of vehicles from Mercedes, the A-Class crossover, the C-Class SUV, the E-Class sedan, the electric G-Wagon, and even the electric van. All of them would be fun to drive in FH6 if all of them come to the game. Next, we stay with Mercedes, but we drop from 2 to 2. And that is the Mercedes SLS, Black Series, and SLS Electric. The Black Series version of the SLS is way more powerful, way more track focused, and it has the ability to throw its back end out and shred its own tyres in minutes. Whereas the electric version was short-lived, but it was in the game Drive Club, and I loved driving it around the tracks in that game. And I'd love to be able to play it in a newer game with more simulated handling and more much better graphics overall. Up next, we're no longer in Germany, we're back in the UK. Technically, it's an English brand made by a German company, because they are under BMW. So, it's Mini with the Mini Cooper E, the electric Mini, which needs to be included because it's a British icon that is catching up to the times of being electrified. And it'll be fun to play around with the electric Mini and the petrol Mini to see who comes out on top. I'd also like the new petrol Mini to arrive in FH6. They had one new Mini in FH5, and that was the JCW. Speaking of JCW, the Mini Cooper JCW convertible. I'd love to have the convertible version in the game, especially if the roof moves as some convertibles were made to in FH5, just on a more run-of-the-mill, everyday family car. Up next is a very short one. The Pagani Utopia. Just look at it. That is all. Moving swiftly on is the return to France to Peugeot with the Peugeot 308. The new 308, which has been updated a little bit. It would be fun to have some everyday hatchbacks back in the game for low power races. And for that, it's missing small cars like the Peugeot 308 and other small cars which are included in this list, but also older cars like the Toyota Aygo, the Ford Ka, and cars along that line. Up next, we stay with Peugeot. For the 508, the 508 is the new sedan and the big brother to the 308, and it is a masterpiece to look at. And it should be a hell of a fun thing to drive with a power output of 350 horsepower. I cannot believe it got that much. That upgraded could have such a brilliant final power output and be competitive against those in its class. Up next, we stay with Peugeot. For the final Peugeot, the 208 GTI, the Yarbo chavvy car that you can find in a Tesco car park at 3 a.m, making tyre screeching sounds and revving its engines at red lights because every red light is a race starting gate. If they even stop, that is. But it'd be fun to thrash it into every corner you can look at on a track, finally putting them tyre squeals where they should be on a closed circuit in a game. Up next, we move over to Germany again, this time for Porsche. And it is the Porsche Panamera GTS Sport Turismo wagon. I specifically chose the wagon version because it looks 1,000 times better than the so-called saloon version, which is in FH5. It needs updating, and that ugly monstrosity of a Panamera from 2017 needs binning and never returning. This car has a better engine and system in it anyway. So go with this one. Up next, we stay with Porsche. This time for the Macan EV. We have older Macans in the game. We have older Cayennes too. It'd be nice to include the current EV versions of both so we can compare the new against the old. Yeah, admittedly, the new has similar stats to the old, but it's electric versus petrol. That'll be fun. Up next, we have the Range Rover EV, We have yet to see the current model of Range Rover come into the game. The newest model we have is a Velar, which is almost 7 years old now. Other than that, we have the Defender 110X, which is 5 years old this year, and that is a Land Rover rather than a Range Rover. So we need some new ranges, and why not start with the EV version and potentially bring in the new ICE version. Up next, this kind of shocked me a little bit when I was writing this out. But we go back to France, we go over to Renault, and we bring out R4. This is the SUV that is reviving the Renault 4 moniker, and it is shaping up to be a gorgeous little car that is going to rival some of the other all-electric SUV options, and having this in Forza Horizon ahead of release to the real world could be one amazing sponsorship and advertising option. In this, I'm also including the Twingo. That's a name that gets a revival with its 90s styling with modern tech. Basically, looks the same as the 90s model, but with modern versions of the parts. Up next, this is a little bit of a fun one for me. The Rivian R3X. This is a hatchback SUV off-roader by Rivian, and it looks amazing. And I, for one, would love to see this in FH6 because it is such a good-looking car. The only downside, it doesn't start coming out until 2026, 2027. So, well into FH6's life cycle, assuming it releases in 2025. But the reason this one is a fun one for me is because in my FH5 cars I wanted to be released, I had the R1T and S, and both of them came to the game, so I'm holding out hope for this one in particular. Up next, I know this is not likely to happen, but Rolls Royces, specifically the Cullinan, Phantom 8, Spectre, Dawn, and Wraith. Basically any Rolls Royce, because we haven't seen them since Forza Motorsport 7, I think, FH3 for sure. And they deserve a comeback with some newer models than the Wraith and Dawn, because it'd be amazing to see them on new hardware and maybe allow us to have some Manzori parts so we can really customize them. It'd be amazing to see these come back. I know they won't, but I didn't think they'd ever be in a video game without being in something like GTA, where it's Rolls Royce, but just different enough that they can get away with it. Ina Super Diamond, for reference. This is going to be a controversial pick, but a Rover. Yeah, I can hear the boos already. And not just one Rover, but a Rover 200, a Rover 400, and a Rover 400 Touring. I know it's going to be hard to find a pristine model of each, but if you can, then please bring them into the game, because it'll be hilarious to drive these up to a drag strip and smoke everyone there with a 1500 horsepower engine swap they didn't know I had. Properly sleeper car territory. Extra marks if we can remove parts or have some parts pre-damaged to help give off that illusion better. Up next, yeah, this is going to end up getting me cancelled, but the SSC Tuatara. This controversial car should be allowed in the game for one reason only: the speed. Yes, the real life speed record of 331 has been discredited, but it would be fun to have the car in game and see what we can do with the car to achieve them sort of speeds. Especially if we have a wider top speed range. That could be fun. Now, away from the the controversy of the SSC Tuatara, we go over to Japan with Toyota, with the Toyota GR Corolla. It's the Toyota GR Corolla. Should I say more? Because it is in Gran Turismo 7, so why not FH6? The Formula Drift version is in FH5, but I would love a normal everyday version in FH6. Up next, we stay with Toyota, but this time it's the Toyota Land Cruiser from 2024. It's a turbo diesel engine car with 280 horsepower, and it could be fun to compare it with others. And if it had some crazy bodywork, then it'd be a top 10 car for sure. And I want to try this car out a lot. So, this one for sure. Up next, we go back to Sweden. We don't go back to Koenigsegg though. We go back to Sweden to go to Volvo with the Volvo EX30. This is a wildcard one. They have added Volvo SUVs in the past, most notably the XC90 in Forza Motorsport 7. So, could they add the EX30 at some point? Perhaps, who knows? Up next, we stay with Volvo. This time, it's the Volvo S60R. This is the early to mid 2000s variant. I would love to see come back. It has not been seen since Forza Motorsport 4, and I'd love to see it come back very soon and try to compare it to the newest version that is currently in the game. We stay with Volvo, but this time it's the V70. This is the only car on this list where I want 3 generations to be included. That being the V70 from the late 90s, the V70 from the early to mid 2000s, and the V70 from the late 2000s to mid 2010s. All 3 are unique in their own way, and all 3 are just as beautiful as each other. And I can't choose which version of it I would prefer. So add all 3. Up next is the VW Buzz microbus. I know this van has to be included in the Forza series at some point. It's basically a rebirth of the Samba bus or the Type 2, whichever you want to call it, which is already in the series. So why not just add the new version? Next up, we stay with VW. We stay with ID. But it's the VW ID Buggy. This is likely not going to happen because concept car. And I don't think it's officially going to be made, but it's a Myers Manx officially endorsed by VW. They took the Beetle, chipped the roof off, stuck an electric motor underneath it, and said, let's go. And we have to paint it this hideously obnoxious lime green colour that everyone will come to love. Because it will look weird in any other colour for some reason. And they were not wrong. I love the colour on this car, and it does look weird in other colours. This has already been in Dirt 5, so hopefully they can sort something out with Playground to get it into FH6. Up next, and this is my final car, ish. This is my final car of cars that have been released or will be released by the end of 2025, if not some point in 2026. This is the Xpeng G6. This is a rather crazy car. It's an alternative to the Tesla Model Y. It's a bit cheaper than a Tesla Model Y, and it's a bit slower than Tesla Model Y. So why do I want it in the game? Because it's crazy, especially in the orange. I've seen it comes in. Plus, with Forza giving us engine swap ability, maybe the motor could be swapped for something more powerful and bring that slower than a Tesla Model Y into a faster than a Tesla Model Y. The next few I have are later than concept stock only, meaning they'll be coming out between 2025 to 2030, but I have to include them because of how cool they look and their stats, because they deserve a mention, and hopefully they can be implemented as quickly as possible upon release if FH6 is still the current game at that point. We are starting with the Aira SUV. I've probably pronounced that wrong, but this SUV boasts a tri-motor setup with a 794 bhp output. And look at the thing. It looks so good. Up next, it's back to Italy, back to Alfa. But this time, it's the Alfa Romeo 4E. Basically, an electric successor to the 4C. It won't come until 2027, but it still looks beautiful. And as usual, Alfa has brought us another physically beautiful car that I cannot wait to see IRL and potentially in this game. Up next is the Aston Martin Project Rambo. Just look at it. If the actual car looks anything like that, it'll sell like hotcakes instantly. Up next, we have the BMW iX3 New Class. Basically, the next generation of iX models. It also uses some styling cues from the M3 New Class, which I did not include, but if the M3 looks like that car does, then I'll be skipping this generation of M3 because it's ugly without the pronounced kidney grille every BMW has had. But the iX3 somehow looked good. Up next, I know this is currently only rumoured about, and it was rumoured to have been announced by the end of 2023, which did not happen. It is the Chevrolet Corvette SUV. Yeah, I know it's probably not going to happen, But the rendition that I saw made me instantly want to drive the car, and I want to try it against its supercar brother. So, on the very small, slim, minute off chance that this is ever going to be made, then I want it on record that I want this in the game. Up next, it is the LEVC L380. It's basically a minivan made by the same company who does the electric London taxi currently, so it'll be amazing to sit in, both IRL and in game, especially if you go into Forza Vista mode. Up next, it is the Mazda MX-5 from 2026. This is going to be a rotary electric setup that is going to pump out 300 plus horsepowers, 300 plus horses in a Miata, in an MX-5, whatever you want to call it. That is insane. And I love it. So shut up and take my money. Up next is the MG2. A little hot hatch with some of the most boring looks I've ever seen, but somehow that makes the car better. Like, how? It's just an MG6 with the front and back flattened down, but it still looks good. How do they do it? And finally, my very final car, the Nissan Hyperforce Concept. Apparently this car is gonna inspire the R36 / next generation of Nissan GTR. And it looks crazy. Then you read the next line where it tells you it's smashing 1,341 wild and angry Japanese horses into the tarmac through all 4 wheels. There's just one problem. It's not due to be here until 2028. And that could all change if they decide to drop the project. So let's hope that they go forward with the R36 and it looks like this car, because, and it has the stats of this car, because, oh damn. But that is it for this video. Let me know in the comment section if you have any suggestions of cars you'd like to see in the game, or cars you'd like to see in Forza at all, Horizon or Motorsport. Leave a like, comment, share, and do subscribe to watch my playthrough of Forza Horizon 6 when it comes out, and watch me do some Top Gear style challenges and lap times up and down a mountain, if there is one with a sort of hill climb, hill descent track I can make. But for now, I will end this video here. And I've been Gamer Jamie 111. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.